Good evening, folks, and welcome back to day number 45 of the Bible in 365. Tonight we are taking a look at Numbers chapter 10, beginning in verse 11, and exploring all the way to Numbers chapter 13, ending in verse 16. You all know the drill. Let's get started. All right, so it's the 12th day of the second month, and the cloud lifts from above the tabernacle. This means it's time for the Israelites to pack up and leave. The story tells us that they leave Sinai and they head to the desert of Paran. Now, the story recounts the order by which the tribes set out, with Judah at the front and Dan in the back. It also notes that the Ark of the Covenant went before them as well during their 3-day journey. Now, Numbers 11 tells us that people started complaining about their hardships, and this angered the Lord. So the Lord burned with fire in the outskirts of the camp and essentially burned up the outer area around the camp. And so this place came to be known as Taberah because of this incident. So momentarily, the Israelites' complaints settle because of the fire incident, but they are aroused again by those who are hungry to eat meat. And so they start romanticizing their time in Egypt, remembering the fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic that they consumed completely for free. All the while forgetting that they were actually slaves while they were in Egypt. And so consequently, they are left ungrateful for the manna that the Lord has provided. At this point, Moses gets angry and tired of all the complaints and the whining of the Israelites, so he cries out to the Lord. And what does he do? He complains. He complains that God has given him this role of leadership, and he states that taking care of the Israelites is like taking care of a bunch of babies that aren't even his. And he's like, this is your fault, is essentially what he tells the Lord. Like, why? In fact, he even asked the Lord to just kill him. He's like, just kill me now because I don't want to face my own demise or my own ruin, because he's afraid that if the Israelites don't get what they want, they will actually kill him. And so the Lord gives Moses some good advice. He's like, I know that you're burdened for these people, so, to show them this burden, take 70 of Israel's elders, and they're supposed to share in this responsibility. And so eventually what's going to happen is these 70 elders are going to prophesy, and they only prophesy this once because the people are like, stop, we get it. Like, it's a lot to, have the Lord speaking to you and having to have that communication. And so within this chapter, perhaps my favorite verses is 18 to 20, because it tells us that the Lord is going to force the Israelites to eat meat for every meal of every day for a whole month until they loathe it, because they weren't grateful for the manna and they were complaining once again, thinking that their time in Egypt was better than their current situation. So essentially, the Lord sends all these quail, and there's so much quail you could walk a day's direction in any way. And what ends up happening here is that the people go out and they gather 10 homers of quail, which is possibly somewhere like 1 3/4 tons. So it's a lot of quail. Now, in the midst of this month where they're consuming quail, it says they still have the meat in their teeth. The Lord sends a plague, and those who are craving other food, maybe the ones who consumed other foods, the text isn't entirely clear here. They're struck by the plague and they die. And so consequently, this place is named Kibroth Hattaavah, which means graves of craving. That's crazy to think about. It's like, stop complaining and start being grateful for what the Lord has given you, because, you might end up dead. But anyways, moving forward to chapter 12. Chapter 12 is also quite interesting because Miriam and Aaron begin bad-mouthing and gossiping about Moses. Now, these are words of opposition from jealousy, essentially. And so the Lord calls Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to the tent of meeting. And the Lord comes down and summons Aaron and Miriam. So they step forward, and he addresses the two of them, and he essentially confronts them about their disrespect. Now, verse 9 tells us that the anger of the Lord burned against them. That's a pretty crazy thing to think about. The anger of the Lord burned against them. They got called out. That ain't cool. Well, it depends. If you're the one being called out, that so is not cool. But anyways, after this conversation, the Lord leaves, and Miriam's skin was plagued with leprosy, And, Aaron and Miriam are like, please, please, Moses, call out to the Lord, have him take this away. And the Lord, is like, hey, my policy, my rules and regulations haven't changed. She's got to be outside the camp for 7 days, so cast her out. And so they cast her out for 7 days before she is able to return. All right, folks, moving forward to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13 tells us that the Lord has commanded Moses to send men to explore the land of Canaan. Now, there is to be essentially a leader from each tribe that goes. So verses 4 through 15 tells us the name of these leaders. And verse 16 confirms that these are, in fact, the men whom Moses is going to send to explore the land that the Lord has promised the Israelites. And so it is here in verse 16 of chapter 13 that our reading ends for tonight. All right, folks, I hope that you will join me tomorrow as we take a look at day 46, which is Numbers chapter 13, beginning in verse 17. And we're going to be exploring all the way to Numbers chapter 15, ending in verse 21. As always, folks, God bless.